Everybody, welcome to the Tactical Traveler. I'm excited to be with you guys today, and I have a very special guest who really needs to be blamed for a lot of things in my life right now. I have with us Travis Johnson, who is a podcasting expert, as well as a U.S. Navy pilot currently on active duty, right, Travis?
Currently on active duty, yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure you weren't in the guard or something, so, I mean, not quite military service, but, it's kind of that gray area. I say that tongue in cheek, but really it is your fault that I'm doing this podcast. We connected in a group for veterans where I don't even remember how we got connected. How did we get connected?
It was probably in the Vetpreneur tribe.
Well, it was in the vet tribe. I'm trying to remember what it was that got me to message you I remember you were asking about some travel stuff. And then I sent you some information on Cubs. And then as we got to talking, you planted this crazy idea in my head about starting my own podcast.
Yep. It's my fault. I'm to blame.
So tell me a little bit about your podcast, and just a shout out for your podcast, because I actually have some commonality with you and what you're doing with your podcast, but kind of tell me about that, why you started it, and what it really is doing for you.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. I host the Nonprofit Architect podcast, where we interview nonprofit leaders, business leaders, consultants, and people with the special skills to help you do it better, help you build a stronger nonprofit. There's so many people out there with big intentions, big visions, and big hearts, but they don't know exactly how to do the nonprofit stuff. Maybe they don't have enough business involved, and they're not sure how to integrate everything. So we have fantastic guests that come on, talk about the how to do the thing. They talk about their trials, their tribulations, and the how to do what really works. And everyone that's listened to the show and implemented the ideas has had fantastic results, and they love everything that we're doing. So much so that we've been ranked number 4 in the U.S., number 6 in Canada, and top 5 in a few other countries. And Podcast Magazine even featured us in their top 25 veteran-hosted shows. So I had a lot of success with it, have a lot of fun with it too.
Awesome. Now, why the nonprofit route? When you look across the scope of what's happening in America, typically when people are going to invest the amount of time and energy that you've done, I mean, you've got guides, you've got consulting, you've got all this stuff that goes into just being a podcast of kind of your magnitude. Why'd you go the nonprofit route? What was it for you that caused that?
Growing up, before graduating high school, I went through 36 moves, 12 schools, 6 states, 5 foster homes, and survived 2 murder attempts. But through all of that stuff, right, through all that garbage, there was always some person, group, church, or nonprofit willing to help keep us sheltered, clothed, and fed. And now that I'm not in a place of scarcity and survival mode, I'm in a place where I can give back. I want to do that, and did a lot of nonprofit work while stationed here in Oklahoma City. Was on the board of the Shine Foundation and Books by Vets. And then I got stationed over in the Kingdom of Bahrain, which for those of you listening that might not know, it's a little island nation off the coast of Saudi Arabia in the Persian Gulf. So surrounded by Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran. But an interesting place to be. And I got over there and I'm like, how am I supposed to do all this great nonprofit stuff I was doing? And someone convinced me, like I convinced you, to start your own podcast. They said I had this smooth, buttery voice that people would listen to, and I get to have great, fruitful conversations with people in the nonprofit world how to do stuff. So I really view it as my mission now to help the helpers do it better. Maybe that kid that they help today in 20 years, 30 years might be the next me that comes along. And I really, really appreciate, full of gratitude for all those that helped me along the way, because there's not a single person out here that does it by themselves. So if I can help them provide better services and have more funding to provide quality programs, then that's what I'm going to do.
That's awesome, man. So I think a natural next question would be, you're full-time active duty pilot in the Navy. How do you have the time to really to merge these two lives together and do it in a way to where you can still be an expert in both fields?
Well, that's a great question because these are not the only two things that I'm doing. I'm doing a ton more of things, but just blocking out your schedule, doing the things that you need to do, knowing what you have to do and when to do it. You know, we don't watch a lot of TV. We're blocking out the time to make sure that we're doing the things we need to grow and do things well. If you're listening to this and you're still serving, there's going to be a time when you're no longer serving. And if you're not working on, I'm in the Navy, right? So part of my day, every day, I dedicate to the Navy. I dedicate to my personal and professional development. And I also dedicate to my education and things I need to do post Navy, which includes, for me, building a podcast, building on my network, building this business, because one day the Navy is not going to be there as my full-time paycheck anymore. And I have to be prepared to do that. So many people in service do a great job dedicating their lives to service. But when something tragic happens, right, the military decides they no longer need you, whether you get hurt, sick, injured, you're at the end of your enlistment or the end of your contract, or it comes time to retire, there's always going to be a reason that the military is no longer going to be your primary life. So if you're not dedicating some portion of time to making sure that you can be successful in the outside world, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice, because you could get in a car wreck tomorrow and it could be all over.
Yeah. So I was working as a contractor for the United States Army for 20 years. And one of the things I saw, because I had such a tenure there, was soldier after soldier who, in two parts, really did not set themselves up for success after they were done. And the first part was that they invested so much of themselves into the career of the military that they really had no identity outside of the military. Mm-hmm. And I've watched them as they retired and almost lose their minds because they don't know who they are anymore without the military. And then the second part, which you and I talked about quite a bit, is that they don't actually take what they're doing and look forward far enough to have a side hustle, to have some sort of secondary income that they can start building on a part-time basis until retirement. And, so they get out, and then it's probably different for you as a pilot, but for a lot of the guys that I work with, they're shooters, they're explosive experts, mm-hmm. or they're, medic guys. And so now the medic guys always have a job when they get out, but the rest of them, the choices kind of became, retire, or go work a contract in some hellhole overseas. It was never Bahrain.
Yeah, Bahrain is wonderful for those of you not familiar with how the military works. They say you're sticking in the Middle East and they say Bahrain, and you're like, oh, well, I guess it's going to be great then. Well, I mean, just a couple of things. I'll clear this up. I'm not a pilot. I'm a naval flight officer. I do mission commander stuff. I run the mission, usually not on the flight deck. So my current aircraft, I work 75 feet behind the pedals and the throttle and stuff. So I don't have that directly translatable job either. And, you see the writing on the walls. Like when I was enlisted for 12 years enlisted, I worked on ejection seats, air conditioning systems, some different things. I got a degree. It was multidisciplinary studies. Then I got a job as a naval flight officer, which also doesn't directly translate. And I'm like, you know what? If I don't start working on something, I'm going to get out of the military, just like you're talking about, and not have a clue with where I'm going to end up. And I spent about 15 years of my time learning about personal finance and some different things. I used to run a blog called Warrior's Wallet, and I helped 400 families pay off $6 million in debt, helping take care of their finances. Once, I got my finances screwed up, and I found the holy saint of debt payment, Dave Ramsey, and wondered why everyone wasn't doing it.
Right.
We paid off all our debt minus our house a few years ago. For those of you that are Dave Ramsey fans, we paid off everything up to baby step number 6, which is pay off your house, which is really the last step besides give to build wealth and give things away. But, our house is less than 5 years from being paid off. If some of the things that I'm doing in my side hustle with the business world and podcasting pays off, I'm going to have my house paid off by next December.
Nice.
And yeah, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. But so many people get wrapped up in that guaranteed paycheck. They're addicted to that first and 15th. And it's hard. It's hard to make
Yeah.
a change. It's hard to understand something different. I mean, one of the things you lose is that guarantee. One of the things you gain is the ability to collect a bonus check.
Yeah.
Work overtime if that's what you're going for. But really, we have the ability to design what we want our life to look like. But that only works if we actually take the steps to make it happen.
It's so funny because you said a couple of things there that are so important. And we get into this mode of service to our country, which I think, based on your tenure and my tenure, I think both of us would agree that that's super honorable, super important. And for everybody who served, man, just the utmost respect. However, we get fed a line of, excuse my French, but bullshit when we join, whether it be the Navy or the Army or even the Marines, which is that, everything will be so much easier when you get out. And I bring this up because, I served from 93 to 96, and I did Ranger School, Airborne School. I did all these cool guys' schools. And then when I got out, I did my resume, and everybody told me how easy it would be to get a job when I got out. And I went to my first job interview after getting out, and the guy was looking through my resume, and he goes, "Oh, wow, what forest did you work in?" I was like, "Forest?" He goes, "Yeah, it says U.S. Ranger." And I'm like, and I realized at that point that I'd been lied to for the better part of 4 years. Like, now the problem with me is I didn't have a guy like you around, and I was dumb enough to do it twice, because then I served 20 years as a contractor, teaching people how to punch people in the face because that's what I loved. And when COVID ended that, there was again no transferable skill set, right? It's just so important that we listen to what you're saying today, and that we begin to think about what does life look like after 2 years, after 5 years, after 10 years, after 20 years. And Dave, so I don't know if you knew this, but Dave Ramsey's right down the street from us, and he does a ton of stuff for the military. So if you're not, doing Dave Ramsey stuff, you should be. So,
I agree. There's a lot of people in the military that work hard, that do amazing things, but they put it all in the service. And if they get to 20 years of retirement as an enlisted guy, and you're an E6, your paycheck, your pension's 20 grand a year. That's a $10 an hour job.
yeah.
That does not set you up for your future. It takes a little bit of the pressure off, right? Because any job you get plus the 20 grand and potentially plus some disability pay can put you in a really good spot. But after 20 years, that's all you're getting. That's not enough. And if you still have, car payments and house payments and loans and all this other BS that we buy that we think we need along the way, yeah, if we have all that stuff stacked up, well, then you're not really getting a reprieve when you quote unquote retire from the military. You're jumping right into your next career because you have to. Yeah. The way we've designed it, and I did most of the debt payment, getting all our debt paid off when I was still enlisted. I was at E5 when I was figuring this stuff out. And, getting rid of our monthly responsibilities, our monthly debt that we had to pay off all the time, the things that don't make us any money, we got rid of all that stuff. We got a very modest house here in Oklahoma City where we could, get in the $400,000 range or more. We got a house at 165 in Oklahoma City. That gets you a lot of house. It's, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage in a nice neighborhood for 156. And that allows us to have a lot of money at the end of the month, and allows us to do a lot of different things. I'm at the point now where I can essentially, at the drop of a hat, go do whatever it is that we want to do because we've designed it that way. We get a car, we get it at a decent price, we drive it for 10 years. Our cars are paid off. We paid them off last year. I've only had the car for 4 years, or my truck for 4 years. It's been paid off for almost a year already. And we're going to plan on driving that thing for 10 years. Why get sucked up into that payment, or you want to have something different or whatever the thing is? Like, what are you really buying? Well, really, you're buying something, you're buying your own shackles to make yourself feel better. And you wonder why you don't have any money to travel or do anything fun.
It's so crazy too. So like when you look at Dave Ramsey's stuff and you look at what he teaches, and then you look at some of the other financial kind of experts out there, most of those guys aren't buying their vehicles. They have some business and they're leasing that vehicle through the business, which then becomes 100% tax write-off.
Yep.
And they're not trapped into some 4 or 5 year depreciating hunk of metal, or I don't even know if they're metal anymore, but
composite, right?
Yeah, composite of plastic and whatever. And I didn't even know this until just recently. I was speaking with a mentor of mine, and I've got a truck, and it's completely paid for, paid cash for it, because I always do the used car route. And he was like, why aren't you leasing? And I was like, well, because I don't want the responsibility and have this depreciating asset. He goes, dude, lease it in your company name and it's a tax write-off. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, it's 100% tax write-off. And I was like, holy cow, I never knew that, right? And I'm going to dive into this with you for just a second too. But there's just such a stark difference in the way that an employee thinks versus the way that a side hustle or a business owner person thinks, right? I mean, what was it that got you to transition from the employee mentality to the business owner mentality, and why?
Well, there's a lot of things along the way that get me interested and sparked the idea and got me moving towards it. But really, it was reading The 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss that really kicked it off for me. He lays it out.
What a great book.
Yeah, he lays it out in a comical, easy to digest and understand format that if you read that book and you don't believe that you can make it work for yourself, you weren't reading the book. It is laid out in such a way that should make everyone believe that this is doable in their world. And really, the biggest things was the mindset. I grew up in trailer parks and foster homes. There was no one in my family or anywhere that was really in business. My one uncle did open like an auto shop in his backyard, right? They built an outbuilding and he's got lifts in there and he does that stuff. But really, he's built himself a job, right? He hasn't really built himself a business. And the same with owner operators for restaurants. They haven't built themselves a business. They built themselves a job. So it's much, bigger difference being a business owner than a business manager. When you can become the owner and set something up that works and runs automatically, or you pay a manager to run it for you, or you have equity in a business, all of a sudden you have money coming in that you're not actively working for. Even a lawyer has to come up with billable hours. Same with an engineer. They get paid great money, but the money's not coming in unless they're actively working on something. And it's the whole idea of not trading hours or dollars for hours that's really intriguing. Like on my site right now, if you go to nonprofitarchitect.org and go to the resources tab, I've got some freebies in there. I got some stuff for a buck or two. Then I've got the ultimate podcast guide, which you mentioned, which got you fired up on this thing here, for $27. I go on and have a conversation with people. I talk about podcasting. I'm a guest on a show like this one today, and I definitely encourage you to go grab the free copy of the 15 reasons I believe everyone, especially in business and nonprofit, needs their own podcast. Grab that for free. Are you going to be on my emailing list? Yeah. Will you get a weekly reminder of all the shows that come out on my network? You will, which is no big deal. But if you want to step up and get something like the Ultimate Podcast Guide, we're hosting it with eJunkie. Anyone at any time of the day can go get that. And I can wake up and have dollars in my account, and I didn't have to do anything. The whole system is automated. It shows up in your email, and it's not one of those ebooks that gives you that buyer's remorse. The ones you pay $15 to $50. You download it, and you're like, what is this garbage? Is how you feel. You feel like you get immediately ripped off. This thing has at least $300 worth of value in it, and I priced it at $27. So you can go in there, get real, valuable, actionable details on how to do this thing, full of templates, and got every little detail that you need to get up and running. And it only costs you $27.
Yeah. I was sharing with you that I had bought a marketing ebook and it cost me $100, and it was a 1-page PDF full of absolute crap. And I was just like, oh my God. And your guide was not like that. I mean, I've organized this entire show off your guide. So it's very practical, very applicable and easy to follow, So I went through and I read it all in one sitting. And then as I get ready for the next section of what I'm doing with this, as I grow the audience, I'm going back to the sections where you talk about it. We were just talking about this just right before we started recording. So now it sounds like you've done quite a bit of Robert Kiyosaki in your conversation there. I mean, you kind of laid out his 4 quadrants of what happens in America with money.
Yeah.
Just saying.
You really, I went from being on the system, right, to having 7 streams of income from welfare, food stamps, to alimony, Social Security, all those things, to being in the military, which I'm still, getting that government cheese, so to speak, but then getting into my own arena where I have something that people can get without interacting with me if they don't need to, and money just shows up in the account. I hopped on a couple of conferences last week and spoke to an hour each to a group of nonprofit professionals about why they need a podcast. And at the end of the hour, from each hour, I got over 30 contacts, right? 30 warm leads downloading my ebook, and then got 4 sales. So for 2 hours worth of work, I made more than $50. I mean, where else can you go get $50 an hour? Just walking and just creating something? You can't do it. I go hop on the laptop, I jump into a conference, and made more than $50 for each of the 2 hours that I was available. And I mean, where else can you do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is that unless you're the doctor, the lawyer, the high ranking government politician or official, as an employee, you're probably not going to make $50-$60 an hour. Again, unless you're in one of those really specialized fields. But as an entrepreneur, you get to pay yourself whatever you feel like you're worth. And that's one of the things that I love about it. There's not a cap to my income, and I can earn what I want to earn. Yeah, there's a struggle in it. And like we were talking about just a minute ago, there's some mind shift stuff that has to happen, and a change in your thinking. But man, and when you look at what's happening in our country right now, there are jobs out there that are $15 an hour, but now unemployment pays you more than $15 an hour.
Well, $15 an hour is garbage anyway. It's only 30 grand a year. If you're worried about the bottom, you're never going to get to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy to me that instead of just taking an ounce of your passion, being a little bit coachable, that people settle for $15 to $30 an hour instead of creating the dream that they've always wanted. And I've never quite understood our process in America.
If you have something that you care about, that you're passionate about, it could be Pokemon cards, sports, nonprofit. It could be anything that you're interested in. There's more people on the planet that are interested in it. And if you can learn and take what you've learned and put it into a product, even as something like a PDF, like my podcast guide, it's 47 pages. It's got legit info. It's a very quick read, very actionable intel. If you can put something together like that, you can start making money by the end of the week. Yeah. But you have to be willing to put something together that's not going to give people bad aftertaste. I bought a couple of those products, like you mentioned, and you get it and you're like, what a ripoff. This guy is a joke. My goal when you get something from me, my goal, as always, is to have no questions. If you've got questions, I must not have put it together right. John's come to me with a couple of questions, and I added it in the guide so the next person that gets it gets a better product. Because I'm not wanting to say, oh, yeah, Travis, I bought his whatever guide, and I can't believe, I never want a single person to say that. That's not what I'm doing it for. I'm not giving it as a preview, because I want to sell you other stuff. Do I have other stuff to sell? Yeah. I'll do a done with you, help you get your podcast set up. I've got done for you service. I even have production services if that's what you're interested in. But I don't care if you get those things. I care if you are able to do it and do it successfully and do it yourself. If you need my help, great. I'll help you out. But you shouldn't need my help after you get that guide. That's not the goal. The goal is to give you real value.
It's actually, I don't want to underplay it, but the guide is so simple that any idiot could do it. It's like the Geico commercial, right? Like, you told me to download one app, and now I'm not doing all the post-production and stuff yet because I'm trying to build momentum on the podcast itself. But dude, like, you told me I should run a podcast, and I had my first episode up after I bought the guide like 3 days later.
Yeah, it can literally be that quick. The hardest part is deciding to do it. And once you take that first step, you're like, oh, well, this isn't too bad. Oh, I can do this. Yeah. It's that first over the hump, like, oh, I'm not sure how to do a thing. And podcast editing, look, so many people are putting this stuff up there raw. They may have, or may not have, but may have got some decent equipment for $200-300, and then they just post it live. You don't have to worry about the editing and the production and all those things if you don't want to. There's tons of shows out there that are going straight live and they don't care. There's nothing wrong with that. You can, right? You can do pre-interviews and you can get the right equipment set up, and you can have a production team, or you can learn how to do it yourself using Audacity or GarageBand or a few different products if you want to, but you don't have to either. There's no rules. You can do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. Well, and mine are not getting edited. And I mean, you look at Joe Rogan, he does a 3-hour podcast. It's all live. Like, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. Whatever happens, happens. And there's no rule on length either. You can hop on there. You can get on flash briefings, do something 2 to 5 minutes. You can do that daily. You can record all of those on one day in 30 minutes and then schedule them to be published. You can do a 5 to 15 minute show that someone can listen to while they're putting on makeup or shaving. You can do a 20 to 40 minute episode that's more in line with people commuting or working out. Or you can do the long diatribes like Joe Rogan or Jocko Willink and do an hour to 3.5, 6 hours worth of content. I thought I heard one. I'm probably wrong there, but it doesn't matter. Like, there's an audience out there for you. There's a group of people that'll listen to whatever time you fill up. Mine's not timed. Mine is, you're on as long as you're interesting in providing value. I've had a 9-minute episode or a 12-minute episode, and I've had an hour and a half episodes because there's just so much value in there. And I'm not going to stretch a 9-minute episode into 30. I'm not going to cut a guy that's just crushing it for an hour and a half. I'm not going to cut him off at 30. So there's no rules.
So I used to be a professional MMA fighter, and then, started training in the military and hand-to-hand combat. And, as that, I had to spend some time doing refereeing, teaching people how to referee, those kind of things. And guys would always ask me, how do you know when to stand a fight back up? And I've taken the exact same approach on the podcast, which is I tell them, hey, look, I'm a professional fighter. If you're boring me, then you're boring the uneducated. And I'm going to stand you up and make you restart. And that's kind of the approach I've taken with the podcast. Is kind of like what you're saying. If it's 20 minutes, but it's engaging, I'm happy. If it's an hour and we're engaging and having a good time, then I'm happy. And I had one yesterday, and we got done, and she was like, oh my God, I was so nervous. What'd you think? And I'm like, I had a great time. She's like, well, it was pretty long. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I had a good time. I really don't care what anybody else thinks at that point, because I had a good time. So,
if you're interesting, if you're having a good time, it's going to work.
Yeah. Right.
Period. That's it. You've learned the secret of podcasting. If it's interesting and it's enjoyable, you're good.
Yeah. Yep. And, and so I've seen with my interviews, they're going, somewhere between 30, 45 minutes ish. And then when I'm doing like my travel hacking stuff, I've got that stuff so down, I'm doing that in 10 minutes. And then I'm doing like a daily business kind of motivation thing, which takes 5 minutes. So like, it really, truly, just like you said, could be anything. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. We do the episodes that are released every Tuesday, and then we take an audiogram. We use a program called Headliner. We put a fancy background, a little squiggly wave line, and we've got a little chunk of audio that we release as a preview the Friday ahead of time. So anyone that's subscribed to me, Nonprofit Architect Podcast, can every Friday it'll pop up and give you, somewhere between 30 seconds and maybe 3 minutes of a little snapshot of the interview. It's great to use for your marketing and all of those things. If you're thinking about right now, if you are a nonprofit or a business or you're some kind of independent consultant, you're like, oh, Travis, I just don't have time for a podcast. Look, I understand. But let me ask you, how much time do you put into your social media strategy? How much time do you spend and waste trying to figure out what to post? If you've got an interview show and you've got 10 questions, well, then those 10 questions and answers can all be a little audiogram created by Headliner. If you don't know how to use Headliner, grab the guide, $27. I walk you step by step through how to set up an audiogram using Headliner, which is a free app. It's not too hard to figure out. There's a couple of YouTube videos out there. I'm sure you can grab those. No big deal. But you've now got content. If you do a weekly show, you've got 5 posts for the morning and 5 posts for the afternoon. You don't have to create anything. It's already done for you. In fact, if it's an interview show, you just ask the question and you make the guest figure out what to say. They've got to come up with all the answers. But right. Now you don't have to figure out what the heck you're posting. If you really take, no kidding, every question and answer, you can take that in an audiogram and now you've got your post for the week and you don't have to do any other work.
Even since you and I talked, there's just such a wealth of information about podcasting out there that really anybody could become a semi-expert in a matter of days. As I thought about these interviews and getting people's kind of travel or business and entrepreneurial stories, I just went and downloaded questions. Like I just typed in top travel questions and some of those kind of things. And there's your questions for the interview. And then I just let you talk.
Well, I've got a couple of things out there. If you were out there wanting to start your own podcast, we definitely want to help you get started either with the podcast guide or the services, if that's up your alley. If you got a budget for something like that, let us know and we can help you get started on the right foot. The podcast guide has done so well that we're turning it into a course. We've hooked up with a small college and they've hooked up with a couple of universities. They create courses professionally. And the Ultimate Podcast Guide is going to be turned into a no-kidding university level course with regional accreditation. So when this comes live, you'll be able to take my course and get no-kidding college credit at the University of San Diego, Colorado State University, or the Forbes Business School out of the University of Arizona. So big things coming down the line, looking to get that into a few more colleges and universities as time goes on, but very excited for that coming up. And also, if you already do host your own show and you are in the nonprofit space or are a veteran, we have at nonprofitarchitect.org, there's a little tab to click on the Nonprofit Podcast Network or the Veteran Podcast Network. Now, I love helping the helpers, and those are free to sign up. You sign up, we throw it up on the website there, and then every show that you publish goes out with our weekly email, so you instantly have access to our entire audience, which is a wonderful, wonderful feature. There will eventually be a freemium service, things that you could pay for to get extras, but to get on the page itself is free all day, every day.
Cool. All right, so I got another question for you. So, and I know this because of a conversation you and I had, but how do you determine when you're going to post a particular episode or interview of your podcast? Because, as we were talking, when I was talking with you, you're like, yeah, this will be sometime in September. So do you just put them in the hopper and do the interviews and then put them out in order? Or do you have like a methodology that you're using?
I don't have a specific methodology. I roughly release them in order. Some people have something they're trying to promote. They want to jump up the list, and I'm willing to let them pay for the privilege of jumping the list. I like to keep it scheduled out. I do one a week. Some people do a daily show. Some people do bi-monthly. They do 2 shows a month. Some people do monthly. There's no rhyme or reason of which one is better or worse. As a host, the more frequently you do interviews, the better host you become. But like we did our interview, was it this week or was it last week? It was probably last week. I've got them in a Google Drive folder, and I put dates on the backside of them when they're going to be released, so I can make sure I do my due diligence, make sure they get the promos out, make sure the guests are sharing to that in their email list. And then when the interview goes live, I send them a follow-up interview that has all the links to everywhere you can find the show, where I give them the embed code so they can put it on their website. So like when this comes live, I'll use that embed code on my page so everyone can see the interview I've done with you. Helps build SEO and credibility and all that fun stuff. So you'll be on my page when this thing goes live. And also give them a sample email template that they can use in MailChimp, Constant Contact, or whatever. They just copy and paste that over. And when they send it out to their email list, it's all done for them. Something else I do is every person I talk to, I end up having a little meeting with, I send them a follow-up email with suggested episodes that can help them through the thing they're struggling with. So everyone I talk to gets a list of 3 to 7 episodes that are helpful for them. And then that turns into part of my marketing solution. They're out there showing and sharing what they've heard from me. So that's also pretty interesting.
That's great. All right, man. Well, listen,
best way to get a hold of me is Nonprofit Architect Podcast. I'm on every channel that we care about: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, Pinterest. If you can put the Nonprofit Architect in, I'm going to come up on one of those. You can go to nonprofitarchitect.org, see all the stuff we've got available. Join our podcast networks for nonprofits and for veterans. Pick up the guide also at nonprofitarchitect.org. And if you got to send an email, nonprofitarchitect@gmail.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll make sure to put that in the podcast notes and make sure that I send you the link so you can embed it as well. So that's a trick I just figured out. I haven't gotten that far in the guide yet.
It's in there.
Cool. Well, man, thanks for your time, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it, John.
Great.